It's an honor to have my friend, Carolyn Glick, on with us. She's, to me, the preeminent columnist, certainly one of them in Israel. And she has a deep knowledge of Israel and the United States, having been born here. And Carolyn Glick, I'm just going to throw it to you. I'm getting concerned that we're getting confusing messages from Biden and Blinken, and they're spending an awful lot of time in Arab countries and an awful lot of time with the Palestinian Authority. Do you have any idea what's going on?
Yeah, I do. Thanks so much for having me on your program, Mark. I really appreciate it so much, and all of the incredible reporting that you've been doing on what's happening here. So a couple of things. One is that, we have over 1,300 who were murdered on October 7th, but we also have another 400 or so who are missing. So the ultimate death toll is probably going to be closer to 1,700. We also got the first hostage video today of a beautiful young 21-year-old woman named Miri Shem, who's being held by Hamas. And we have to remember that just like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Hamas, is a jihadist group, and the jihadist doctrine has you rape women and bring them in to serve as your sex slaves. And so there's a real concern about that. She was wearing a lot of makeup. Kayla Mueller, the U.S. hostage of ISIS who was killed in 2015 in a U.S. airstrike, was killed because she was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the ISIS commander's sex slave in his house. So there's a lot of concern, a lot of concern, and one of the concerns really is that we see just how evil Hamas is. This is a war between evil and good. They oppose everything that we hold dear. First and foremost, the sanctity of life. And one of the things that's most upsetting is the moral relativism, the attempt by the media, by the left, to forge some sort of moral equivalence between the victims of this horrible evil and the terrorists who are being targeted in Gaza by Israel in our counteroffensive. And one of the most alarming aspects of this is that we're seeing this moral equivalence manifesting itself in the Biden administration's actions and policies in relation to Israel and our military operations here, which goes to your specific question about what we're getting from them. So one of the things that I've been briefed on that I've come to understand is that both President Biden and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who was also here, and Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who's here now for the second time in under a week, have pledged to provide Israel with the munitions that we need in order to successfully prosecute this war. But it works out that approval of the procurement is almost on a case-by-case basis, that they're parsing the support in a way that conditions it on Israel's good behavior. And their conditions on the U.S. military assistance are making it very difficult, if not as a practical matter, impossible for Israel to achieve our war aims.
Can this be part of the reason why there's a delay? We hear weather, we hear the troops are green, we hear this, we hear that. Could it possibly be, in part at least, that the Israeli leadership has to check with the United States leadership, or the United States leadership is trying to pull them back, or things of that sort going on, do you think?
So here, I'll give you two examples. One is today we had 4 missile strikes on Tel Aviv, and I think 1 or 2 in Jerusalem. And so those missiles are not just being shot from missile bases. We would have hit a missile base if there was a missile base to shoot it. They're being shot from underneath UN schools and hospitals in Gaza. And the fact that these schools have been transformed into missile launching sites makes them military targets. It also, of course, shows just how absurd it is for the UN to act as though there's some sort of independent organization in Gaza when they're completely subordinate to Hamas terrorists. But be that as it may, the Biden administration is apparently prohibiting Israel from bombing those sites. Hamas's headquarters is beneath Shifa Hospital in Gaza, and the United States is demanding that Israel not touch Shifa, even though that's the military headquarters of a terrorist organization that's waging a genocidal war against us. So these are the sorts of things. And then the other aspect of it is that, we want to make sure that we don't face a massacre of our forces. And some of the places that we have to bomb before we can go in require bunker buster bombs, because what we see above the ground in Gaza is only a small part of what Hamas has. The vast majority of their war machine is in a network of underground warrens, and some of them are rather deep, and they require, either if they want, we could go old school and just put, bomb them with gas, but nobody wants to do that, and so we need bunker busters, and the Americans are apparently, again, conditioning that on something else, which is this euphemism for resupply of Hamas, referred to as humanitarian aid. And so Blinken was in the War Cabinet today, reportedly demanding that Israel permit this so-called humanitarian aid into Gaza. And he threatened, this is on the open media that's already been reported, that Israel would lose international support if we deny humanitarian aid in Gaza. And the thing is that it's illegal.
Carolyn Glick is with me. Carolyn Glick, Blinken has been meeting with Netanyahu now for 7 hours. Mm-hmm. He's not a war strategist. He's a diplomat.
Right.
I suspect what he's doing in there is pounding the table, trying to get Netanyahu to bend to their demands on targets, on weaponry. He's probably receiving a number of threats behind the scenes while the Biden administration is out front, acting tough, sending two, major ships and their accompanying ships with them. Is that what's going on?
That's what I'm hearing, and that's also what's being reported. And that goes to what we were talking about regarding the humanitarian aid. The main thing that's being discussed by Blinken and making it very clear that he's making these demands of Israel is that there are a couple hundred trucks on the Egyptian side of the border with Gaza. Now, everybody wanting to prevent a humanitarian disaster for civilians in Gaza, the one way to do it is to pressure Egypt and Egyptian President Sisi to accept Gazans as refugees in the Sinai across the border, because then they will be immune from the Israeli military operation in Gaza. That's the only way to do it. I mean, the only other land border with Gaza is with Israel, and it's absurd to think that we would allow people who are waging war against us to seek refuge in our territory. That's just insane. But
I want to hone in. There's a 7-hour meeting going on with Blinken. I'm hearing from other sources, and I'm hearing directly from you, that in fact the United States is tying Israel's hands. Is that what you're hearing? Because that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, and so this is just the humanitarian aid. What is humanitarian aid? I said in the previous segment that Hamas is bombing Israel from underneath schools in Gaza, right? Underneath UN schools in Gaza. There is not one installation, one individual in Gaza who is not under the complete control of Hamas terrorists. Not one. So they will be the ones in charge of all of these trucks that will be coming into Gaza. And there's no way of inspecting them. Who's going to inspect them? Those same UN inspectors who live by at the pleasure of Hamas? Who's going to inspect them and make sure that
So you mean weapons could be coming in?
Anything could be coming in. And by the way, the trucks themselves are weapons. And so any truck that comes in is another weapon for Hamas, even if it's empty. That baby formula that they claim is in those trucks, that won't be going to the hostages, the babies they're holding hostages. They'll go to whoever Hamas wants to give it to. The same with the food. The same with everything. The same with the fuel. The fuel isn't going to be, fueling generators and refrigerators to feed hostages. That's the real humanitarian crisis in Gaza, is that they're holding 200 hostages, Americans too, over 20 Americans. This is the largest hostage crisis America has seen in decades. So, this is Hamas. This is the face of evil, and the United States is saying that it's humanitarian assistance to provide Hamas with direct aid, which brings us back to international law. Because the Biden administration keeps insisting from the outset, we expect Israel to adhere to the laws of war as a democracy. Well, the United States is breaching them by demanding humanitarian aid be delivered to Gaza, because binding UN Security Council 1373 from 2001 bars all UN member states. It was drafted by the United States. Bars everybody from providing direct or indirect assistance to terrorists. And that's precisely what the United States is now demanding that Israel do. Breach international law.
Even here, I'm looking at the Blaze, and it says UN agency responsible for supporting Palestinian refugees is accused of trying to provide cover for Hamas. UNRWA released a statement on Sunday accusing Hamas of stealing fuel and critical medical supplies from its compound in Gaza City, and they've since pulled that tweet. They took it off the social media.
Right. They thought that they might get a little bit of traction on that for a second, and then Hamas looked at them askance, and they pulled it off immediately because they live at the pleasure of Hamas. That's the whole point. There is no such thing as humanitarian assistance to Gaza. It's only resupply to Hamas. And that's what the United States is demanding that Israel undertake, which means that as we have hundreds of thousands of soldiers now poised at the border to invade Gaza, the United States is demanding that we provide the Hamas with resupply that can be used to kill our soldiers.
Mm-hmm. I knew something was wrong because I don't trust Biden. And on top of all of this, Carolyn Glick, he rearms Iran. He rearms the Palestinians. He's still rearming them. He hasn't cut a single penny from Iran or the Palestinians, reversing course on the Trump policies. And he also stabs Israel in the back and says he doesn't recommend they occupy that area. What do you mean occupied? It was Israeli before the Israelis gave it away. Now, that said, doesn't Israel get to make decisions about its own war, how it commits acts of peace, I'll say, things of that sort? You're going to have Biden blew up Afghanistan. He blew up Russia and Ukraine. China is poised to invade Taiwan. And these guys sit around, these Ivy League eggheads, although he's not even Ivy League, and play war games. Who's going to go where? Don't hit this, don't hit that. And while our border's wide open, for God's sakes. I'm very worried about this. Did you have anything else you wanted to edify us on?
The only thing is that, it seems to me that the American people should also have to have a say in this. I speak all the time to the American media and the outpouring of support that Israel is receiving. By the way, those 2,000 U.S. forces that are coming to the region aren't coming to Israel. They're not combatants. I mean, they're not combat soldiers.
I know exactly what they're doing. It's what I said. They're there in case our ships or our jets have to take action or not. They're not going to take orders from the Israeli military. I'm just telling you, that's why they're there. We are going to coordinate with ourselves as is necessary. That's why they're there.
So the last thing I'll say is, back in 2014, Congress passed supplemental aid to Israel in the provision of Iron Dome missiles, which, by the way, the United States stipulated in our agreement with them that all the missiles have to be reproduced in the United States. So we definitely need resupply of those and of our Air Force bombs that are produced in the United States. And Obama didn't want it, but he was forced to sign because you had overwhelming congressional support for the measure, and so he wasn't going to veto it. And here, I think that Congress could also play a role in passing a resolution, for instance, regarding unconditional support for Israeli victory, the need to reconquer Gaza as a war aim. Who knows what we'll do with it the day after, but it's clear that a terrorist organization of any kind, not the PLO, not Hamas, not anybody, can be in charge of security there because it'll just be a matter of time and it'll wreck Israel's regional posture. So I think, it's very important. I know that the American people, so many, are standing with Israel. evil and with good against evil, and understanding that the evil also resides in the United States in the form of all the people supporting Hamas on college campuses and in the streets of U.S. cities. So I think there's so many good Americans there, and it's important, to be told that the Biden administration should know that, that it's expected to keep its word and stand with Israel and enable us to defeat Hamas. But you can't do that by pretending away the nature of the evil that we're facing.
I mean, I'm just saying, you got Hamas, Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south, you got Iran wherever they want to be, I suppose. And then you have an ally in the United States where the Secretary of State, who is a complete disaster, an Obamanoid, sitting down there with the Prime Minister 7 hours. That is a long damn time, 7 hours. And they're not talking about some peace agreement. They're not even talking about diplomacy. He's there delivering the message. Go ahead.
Just one more thing. I know your time is very short. I've been playing some condolence calls at the homes of soldiers. We have a family funeral for a young woman, a cousin who was killed at the dance party. But these soldiers who gave their lives and the ones on the border, I mean, there's no force in the world that's more courageous and more driven than our soldiers. I mean, these people gave their lives in the most heroic ways on October 7th to save hundreds and hundreds of people who otherwise would be captive now in Gaza or be dead and with their bodies burned and unidentifiable. And, you're not talking about a country of cowards who want the United States to come in and save us. All we're asking is for the means to do the job ourselves. That's what the United States always pledged to Israel. That's what its pledge has always been, to provide us with the means to defend ourselves by ourselves. And that's our hour of need is now. Mm-hmm. And we need those arms, and we don't need conditions placed on them. We are a moral, good, God-fearing people. And we are America's most steadfast ally in the Middle East. And anything that happens to us is going to reflect poorly on the United States. And we thank everybody for their support. And just please stand with us now.
All right. You be safe over there. I know you're in and around Jerusalem, but I'm not going to be specific for your own safety. God bless you, my friend. And people, you can go to her site, which is really very informative. She gets a lot of inside information and has very, very sound and wise thinking. And that would be Carolyn, spelled like Caroline, Glick.com. CarolineGlick.com. All right, Carolyn, take care of yourself.
JNS.org, where I'm senior editor.
All right, I got it. I want to get you people to your site. Mm-hmm. All right, take care.
Thank you.
All right, God bless.